Long before the first cities rose from the Fertile Crescent, long before agriculture shaped human life, and long before the pyramids etched themselves into the imagination of the world, there existed a landscape that defies comprehension. On a windswept plateau in what we now call southeastern Turkey, enormous limestone pillars rise from the soil in concentric rings, some taller than a modern three-story building. Their surfaces are carved with strange reliefs, animals, abstract symbols, and enigmatic patterns that seem deliberate, yet their meaning remains elusive. These stones are older than civilization as we know it, older than the invention of writing, and they challenge the very assumptions we hold about the capabilities of early humans. For decades, they have been described as temples, altars, places of ritual, or ceremonial gathering points. Scholars have painted scenes of feasting and worship, imagining societies that came together to honor gods we will never know. But a persistent question lingers beneath the dust and the academic consensus. Could these be something else entirely? Could these monumental stones, painstakingly carved and arranged in geometric patterns, have served a function beyond the symbolic, a practical purpose that has been overlooked for millennia? What if they were, in a sense, machines, mechanisms designed with intention and precision that modern eyes struggle to recognize? This is not the realm of fantasy or conjecture without basis. Recent discoveries across the world have uncovered similar phenomena. In Jordan, immense stone circles appear nearly perfect in their geometry, spanning hundreds of meters, their purpose uncertain, their scale staggering. In Bolivia, the platforms of Tiwanaku reveal precision that rivals modern engineering, with blocks cut and placed so accurately that even contemporary techniques struggle to replicate them. And in the waters off Greece, the Antikythera mechanism offers tangible proof that complex, precise machinery existed in the ancient world, capable of tracking the movements of the heavens. These findings hint at a broader pattern. Ancient humans, far from being primitive or solely ceremonial, may have possessed an understanding of material, geometry, and perhaps energy that we are only beginning to glimpse. As we begin this journey, it is important to hold two truths in tension. First, the conventional interpretation that these sites were centers of ritual, social gathering, and symbolic expression. Second, the possibility that we are witnessing evidence of functional purpose, of structures designed to measure, to calculate, to resonate with celestial or terrestrial phenomena. The stones themselves do not speak, yet their geometry, alignment, and construction whisper questions about their original role in human society. Were they silent witnesses to early science? Or are they monuments whose significance was purely symbolic, their utility a projection of modern curiosity? At Gobekli Tepe, the largest and most famous of these sites, the pillars are arranged in circles with T-shaped stones rising like sentinels. Some enclosures contain pillars with hollowed sections, grooves, and basins that invite speculation about their practical use. Archaeologists have meticulously catalogued these features, but the discussion often returns to ritual, feasts, ancestor worship, or spiritual gatherings. Yet there is a growing body of researchers who suggest that the precision and complexity of the site point to knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and mechanics. They note alignments that correspond to the movements of celestial bodies, the careful orientation of stones, and patterns that repeat across enclosures in ways that may not be purely symbolic. Nearby, Karahantepe presents similar constructions, reinforcing the idea that these were not isolated experiments, but part of a wider cultural and technological horizon. The repetition of forms, the use of circular layouts, and the geometric precision suggest a shared understanding, a cognitive framework capable of abstract reasoning and practical application at a scale that challenges traditional models of prehistoric society. These are not mere rocks arranged in ritual. They may be the first signs of structured interaction with natural forces, intentional shaping of the environment to produce desired effects, whether acoustic, visual, or astronomical. The idea that these structures could function as mechanisms is radical, not because it is impossible, but because it challenges entrenched assumptions. Scholars caution against overinterpretation, emphasizing the need for evidence of use, wear, or moving parts. And yet, even without moving components, the stones themselves may embody functional principles. A carved socket could anchor a pole for alignment, a hollowed cylinder could resonate with sound or hold liquids for measurement, and radial platforms may serve as a form of spatial computation. We are accustomed to thinking of machinery as moving gears and levers, but perhaps the ancients conceived of function differently, embedding calculation and observation into stone, geometry, and placement rather than in portable devices. This notion compels us to reconsider not only these specific sites, but the broader trajectory of human technological history. We tend to measure progress in linear terms, from stone tools to bronze to iron to the machine age. Yet if these stones, these silent monuments, were indeed functional, it would suggest that advanced understanding of mechanics and geometry existed in nascent forms far earlier than previously thought. The history of human ingenuity may be less a straight ascent than a tapestry of forgotten experiments, lost techniques, and intermittent leaps of understanding. Across continents, similar questions emerge. In Jordan, enormous circular enclosures mirror the precision seen in Turkey, yet their purpose remains unconfirmed. In South America, at Tiwanaku, massive blocks fit with millimeter precision, their arrangement implying not only mastery of stone, but of alignment and measurement. The Antikythera mechanism demonstrates that humans have long built intricate machines for practical purposes, capable of mapping celestial events. Viewed together, these discoveries raise a profound question. Have we been misreading the evidence, classifying functional innovation as purely spiritual or symbolic simply because it does not fit preconceived narratives? In this exploration, we will examine each site in detail, investigating the history, culture, and scientific evidence that surrounds them. We will consider the skeptics and the supporters, the archaeologists who insist on ritual interpretations, and the engineers and physicists who propose functional purposes. We will explore geometric patterns, acoustic properties, alignment with the heavens, and the subtle precision in stone that continues to baffle modern scientists. We will not claim certainty, but we will ask questions with rigor, combining cultural context, historical record, and scientific reasoning to illuminate possibilities that have been largely ignored. As we stand at the threshold of this investigation, we are invited to rethink everything we know about ancient technology, about human capability, and about the purpose of stone itself. Perhaps these sites were more than monuments. Perhaps they were deliberate attempts to understand, measure, and interact with the world in ways that challenge our assumptions. And perhaps, if we are willing to look closely, they can teach us not only about the past, but about the breadth of human imagination, the sophistication of early societies, and the questions we have yet to answer about our own history. What if these stones were not altars, not tombs, not simple symbols, but something more profound? The earliest machines embedded with knowledge that we have forgotten how to read. This question, unanswered but irresistible, will guide us as we explore the deserts of Jordan, the highlands of Turkey, the plains of South America, and the waters off Greece. The journey begins here, at the doorway to human ingenuity, in the shadow of stones older than civilization itself. If you are liking it, consider subscribing to our channel. Now, from the doorway of human ingenuity, we step into the monumental world of Gobekli Tepe, a site that has rewritten the very timeline of civilization. Rising from the arid plateau of southeastern Anatolia, this complex of stone enclosures, pillars, and carvings confronts our expectations of what hunter-gatherer societies could achieve. These people, living in a world without farming, without permanent settlements, and without writing, undertook a project that demanded not only immense labor, but sophisticated understanding of geometry, planning, and the properties of stone. They sculpted limestone pillars, some towering over 5 meters, transported them across uneven terrain, and arranged them with circular precision, forming spaces whose function remains enigmatic yet undeniably intentional. The scale alone is staggering. Excavations reveal multiple circular enclosures, each containing between 10 and 20 T-shaped pillars. These are not mere stacks of rock, but carefully positioned monuments. Many pillars bear intricate reliefs: lions, foxes, snakes, vultures, and abstract motifs that evoke both the familiar and the alien. Scholars have long emphasized their symbolic value, interpreting the imagery as totems of spiritual belief, representations of myth, or markers of ritual identity. Yet beyond the iconography lies another layer: the geometry of placement, the meticulous spacing, the hollowed sockets and basins carved with precision. Here, the stones themselves seem to invite more than worship. They invite examination, measurement, interaction. Recent studies suggest that the layout of these enclosures is far from arbitrary. The circles are neither chaotic nor improvised. They follow discernible geometric patterns. Concentric rings, equidistant spacing, and radial alignments hint at knowledge of symmetry and proportion that would be remarkable even in societies much later in history. Some researchers have proposed that these configurations could serve practical functions, aligning with celestial events, marking solstices, or calibrating observations of the heavens. Others suggest acoustic properties. Hollows and depressions in the stone might manipulate sound, concentrating it at specific points, or producing resonances during gatherings. Though speculative, these ideas are grounded in the physical realities of the structures, in the way stone interacts with vibration and light, in patterns that seem repeated across enclosures. Yet, beyond speculation, the practical ingenuity of the builders is evident in the very labor required. The pillars, carved from local limestone, were quarried, shaped, and transported across distances of several hundred meters to their final locations. Without metal tools, they achieved astonishing precision. Some surfaces are flat to a degree that allows nearly seamless alignment with neighboring stones. Some enclosures contain stones with carefully bored depressions or sockets, suggesting the use of levers, poles, or other implements that required an understanding of force distribution. The logistical coordination alone, sourcing materials, shaping them, and positioning them correctly, implies social organization, planning, and technical knowledge far beyond what was assumed possible for pre-agricultural societies. The site is not an isolated anomaly. Nearby Karahantepe, part of the broader Tepe complex, presents a continuation and expansion of the same architectural language. Its pillars are similarly arranged, its reliefs similarly detailed, yet it introduces variations that hint at experimentation with form and structure. Some stones are carved with protrusions that resemble sockets or bearings. Others are set on platforms with radial symmetry. These features suggest that the builders were exploring not just artistic expression, but the potential mechanical properties of stone, how it could support weight, distribute force, or interact with other components. The repetition of form across these sites suggests a shared knowledge system, one that transcends mere decoration and points toward deliberate engineering principles embedded in stone. This raises profound questions about the cognitive capabilities of the builders. They conceived and executed structures that required abstraction, planning, and measurement. They understood the relationship between shape, stability, and orientation. They may have understood how to harness natural forces, gravitational, acoustic, or luminous, to produce effects that are difficult for modern observers to reconstruct. Yet the absence of written records means that much of this knowledge has been lost to time. We can observe the outcomes, the precise alignments, the architectural ingenuity, but we are left to infer the principles behind them. It is a puzzle both tantalizing and frustrating, a glimpse into a world that was technologically sophisticated in ways that challenge linear narratives of progress. The reliefs themselves invite speculation. Predatory animals carved in high relief, often in dynamic poses, may have conveyed symbolic meaning, but they also suggest an acute observational ability. Every musculature, every curve, every orientation indicates careful study and replication. Could these depictions serve dual purposes, as teaching tools, visual records, or even coded instructions for movement, placement, or timing? Some researchers have noted that the arrangement of certain animal motifs aligns with seasonal cycles, hinting at the possibility that these sites functioned in part as calendars or astronomical observatories. Others speculate that the carvings may have interacted with light and shadow in ways that marked time or signaled events. Among the most intriguing features are the so-called hollowed pillars. Some contain cylindrical recesses or grooves that suggest the insertion of poles, rods, or other components. Scholars who focus on ritual interpretations have tended to view these as symbolic or ceremonial receptacles, perhaps for offerings or libations, yet others suggest a functional role. These hollows could have supported frameworks, stabilized objects, or acted as parts of larger assemblies, possibly even as primitive mechanical instruments. The idea is not that these were machines in the modern sense with gears and motors, but that their design encoded purpose, measurement, or interaction, a form of proto-engineering translated into stone. Acoustic considerations add another layer to the mystery. Studies of stone chambers and enclosures in similar megalithic sites worldwide have shown that specific shapes and dimensions can amplify or focus sound. Some depressions and hollows in Gobekli Tepe's pillars could produce resonance, channeling sound to specific points within the circle. Whether this was used for ritualistic effect, communication, or practical measurement is unknown. But the very possibility indicates that these ancient builders were attuned not only to the visual and structural properties of stone, but to its physical behavior in multiple dimensions: vibration, resonance, and interaction with the environment. The cultural context of these constructions cannot be ignored. We are dealing with a society that predates settled life, that survived through hunting, gathering, and seasonal movement. Undertaking monumental architecture in this context implies that social cohesion, technical skill, and collective memory were already highly developed. The complexity of the sites challenges the assumption that large-scale construction required agriculture or surplus production. Instead, it suggests that cognitive and organizational sophistication may have preceded technological specialization, that understanding and conceptualization were already remarkably advanced in what we would otherwise consider a primitive stage of human history. As the stone circles and T-shaped pillars continue to rise from the soil, questions multiply. Why did these societies invest so much labor into structures whose purpose eludes us? Was it purely symbolic, a projection of belief into monumental form? Or did the stones encode functional knowledge, spatial, mechanical, or astronomical, that has since been obscured by time? Modern technology allows us to measure angles, alignments, and distances with precision to detect patterns invisible to the human eye alone. And yet, even with these tools, the meaning of the site remains elusive. The stones hold information, yes, but interpreting it requires careful observation, imagination, and willingness to consider possibilities that challenge conventional frameworks. There is a profound tension between caution and curiosity in the study of Gobekli Tepe. Archaeologists who adhere to conservative interpretations emphasize ritual, ceremony, and symbolic meaning, warning against overreach or speculative theorizing. They remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, yet others argue that the patterns, alignments, and construction techniques hint at purpose beyond ritual, a deliberate encoding of function in stone, an ancient understanding of forces, movement, or celestial cycles that modern eyes may struggle to reconstruct. This debate reflects the broader challenge in archaeology, distinguishing intention from coincidence, function from symbolism, and cognition from decoration. What is undeniable is that Gobekli Tepe represents a threshold in human history. It is a place where early humans interacted with stone in ways that required foresight, skill, and understanding. It challenges linear narratives of technological development and invites reconsideration of the capabilities of pre-agricultural societies. Whether one interprets it as the birthplace of ritual, the earliest known laboratory of mechanical experimentation, or some combination of both, the site compels a re-evaluation of human ingenuity. It suggests that knowledge was embedded in form, in placement, and in design long before the invention of writing or recorded science. From this foundation, the journey continues, moving outward to other sites that echo in stone and design the sophistication witnessed here. Jordan, South America, and the broader Mediterranean contain structures that share precision, scale, and enigmatic geometry, hinting at a network of understanding that spans continents and millennia. Each site presents its own questions, its own challenges to interpretation, yet all converge on a single possibility: that the ancient world, far from being simple, was a landscape of knowledge and experimentation, where stone itself was a medium for observation, calculation, and perhaps even early mechanical purpose. In exploring Gobekli Tepe, we have glimpsed the remarkable capacity of early humans to transform raw material into ordered space, to project intention into stone, and to encode knowledge in ways that survive beyond the limits of memory. The site does not yield its secrets easily, but it does compel us to think differently about the past, to consider function where we have only seen symbolism, and to imagine that the earliest monuments may have been laboratories as much as temples, instruments as much as altars. It is a world suspended between the known and the possible, and it beckons us to continue the exploration. Following the monumental landscapes of Gobekli Tepe, one cannot help but notice the underlying order that organizes the seemingly chaotic expanse of stone. Beyond the reliefs and sculpted figures, the placement of each pillar, each enclosure, reveals a sophistication that speaks not only of artistic vision, but of geometric mastery. Recent studies conducted in 2024 and 2025 have shed new light on this aspect of the site, uncovering deliberate geometric patterns that suggest the builders were working with principles of design far more precise than previously imagined. Researchers Avi Gopher and Gil Hackley have meticulously mapped the enclosures, measuring the distances between pillars, the radii of circular formations, and the angular relationships among structures. Their analysis reveals alignments and symmetries that are statistically improbable to have arisen by chance, suggesting that the layout of Gobekli Tepe was guided by an intentional system of spatial organization. These findings challenge long-standing assumptions in archaeology. Traditionally, the site has been described as a center of ritual and social congregation, with circular enclosures interpreted as arenas for feasting or spiritual ceremonies. While these interpretations remain plausible, the geometric precision now documented invites a re-evaluation. The distances between pillars often form ratios that correspond to early forms of mathematical understanding, hinting that the architects were not only concerned with symbolic representation, but also with measurable relationships. Some enclosures display near-perfect concentric circles, while others show alignments that correspond to cardinal points or specific angles, possibly marking solar, lunar, or stellar phenomena. The possibility that Gobekli Tepe encoded a form of spatial logic extends beyond the confines of individual enclosures. When analyzed collectively, the arrangement of multiple circles across the site suggests a pattern of scaling, modularity, and repetition. Certain pillars appear to act as keystones in the spatial system, anchoring alignments or serving as reference points for measuring distances and angles. These observations have led some researchers to propose that the site may have functioned, at least in part, as a tool for observation, calculation, or recording information. The stones themselves could be viewed as components in a prehistoric system of measurement, a landscape-scale instrument whose function has been obscured by the passage of time. Gopher and Hakley's studies go further, applying computational models to simulate potential functions of the site. By mapping the enclosures digitally and testing hypothetical alignments with celestial events, they found that several circles align with solstices and equinoxes. Shadows cast by the pillars at sunrise and sunset appear to fall along precise lines within specific enclosures, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of the movement of light and time. This raises the question, were these spaces purely symbolic, or were they intended as early astronomical devices capable of tracking seasonal changes and celestial cycles with practical accuracy? While mainstream archaeology emphasizes ritualistic explanations, the geometric findings suggest that function and symbolism need not be mutually exclusive. Ancient societies may have integrated practical observation with spiritual expression, encoding knowledge about the natural world in a form that also carried cultural significance. The challenge lies in distinguishing deliberate function from aesthetic or symbolic design. Complexity alone does not prove utility, yet when repeated patterns, precise alignments, and measurable ratios converge, it becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss the possibility that these structures served multiple purposes simultaneously. Comparative analysis with other prehistoric sites reinforces this perspective. Across the region, similar circular enclosures and stone alignments hint at a broader tradition of geometric awareness. Karahantepe, Gobekli Tepe's sister site, exhibits comparable layouts with concentric pillars and radially oriented enclosures. The repetition of these forms suggests the transmission of architectural knowledge, implying that principles of geometry were shared, taught, and refined across generations. Such standardization is more than decorative. It demonstrates intentionality, a conceptual framework that could support both symbolic meaning and practical function. Some researchers have explored the possibility that these geometric principles encoded numerical or calendrical information. The number of pillars in certain enclosures, the spacing between them, and the angular divisions of circles may correspond to lunar cycles, seasonal intervals, or astronomical phenomena. If so, Gobekli Tepe and similar sites could represent some of the earliest forms of spatial computation, using stone as both medium and tool. The notion that early humans employed physical structures to encode knowledge, combining mathematics, observation, and geometry, challenges conventional narratives about the linear development of technology and science. Beyond measurement and observation, the geometric patterns may have had structural or mechanical implications. Circular and radial arrangements are inherently stable, distributing weight and force evenly, which would have been critical when constructing massive stone pillars without mortar or metal reinforcement. Certain enclosures feature central pillars that appear to bear structural significance, supporting the surrounding stones while also aligning with broader patterns across the site. This intersection of structural engineering, geometry, and spatial design hints at an integrated understanding of materials, mechanics, and the environment, an understanding that transcends symbolic interpretation alone. The implications extend to our understanding of early cognition and cultural sophistication. The ability to conceive and execute these geometric arrangements requires abstract thought, spatial reasoning, and planning. It demands not only physical skill, but the capacity to visualize relationships, anticipate interactions between components, and maintain precision over large distances. In other words, the builders of Gobekli Tepe were thinking in terms that are at once mathematical, spatial, and practical, encoding knowledge into stone at a scale that continues to astonish modern researchers. This convergence of mathematics, observation, and construction raises a philosophical question. Is complexity alone sufficient to imply function? Can we distinguish between intricate design created for aesthetic or ritual purposes and that which is intended for practical measurement, computation, or manipulation of natural phenomena? The patterns at Gobekli Tepe suggest that the two are not mutually exclusive. Functionality may have been embedded within symbolism, observation encoded in ceremony, and calculation interwoven with art. Such integration challenges our assumptions about prehistoric societies, prompting a re-evaluation of what constitutes technology and how it might manifest in a world without writing, metal tools, or formal engineering education. As we reflect on these geometric insights, it becomes clear that Gobekli Tepe is more than a monument. It is a record of thought, an expression of knowledge, and potentially a mechanism for observing, measuring, and understanding the environment. The site exemplifies a form of proto-technology where human ingenuity was embedded directly into the landscape through geometry, alignment, and spatial logic. It invites us to reconsider the boundaries between ritual, art, and engineering, challenging the notion that early human societies were incapable of systematic, practical, and abstract reasoning. In exploring these patterns, we will continue to examine how other ancient sites may encode function in unexpected ways, from the enormous stone circles of Jordan to the precision platforms of South America, revealing a tapestry of knowledge that spans continents and epochs. Understanding the geometric logic of Gobekli Tepe is only the beginning. It is a lens through which the broader possibilities of ancient human ingenuity come into focus. If you are fascinated by the intricate patterns, the careful calculations, and the possibility that stone itself may have served as a medium for knowledge and measurement, subscribe to continue this journey. Together, we will explore the hidden architecture of ancient intelligence, uncovering the connections between form, function, and the enduring mysteries of human invention. Beyond the monumental rings of Gobekli Tepe, the landscape of southeastern Anatolia unfolds into a network of equally compelling sites, each echoing the ingenuity and vision of early human societies. Among them, Karahantepe rises quietly from the hills, less celebrated but no less remarkable, offering insights into the breadth and depth of prehistoric engineering. Discovered in proximity to Gobekli Tepe, Karahantepe has challenged archaeologists from the moment of its excavation, revealing circular enclosures, massive T-shaped pillars, and reliefs that reflect a cultural continuity and sophistication far older than previously acknowledged. Some evidence even suggests that Karahantepe may predate Gobekli Tepe itself, raising the possibility that monumental construction in this region began earlier than scholars have dared to imagine. The site consists of multiple circular and oval enclosures, each composed of carefully arranged limestone pillars. These pillars, like their counterparts at Gobekli Tepe, often rise over 4 meters in height, carved with remarkable precision. Unlike the simpler, more rigidly vertical stones of other Neolithic sites, many at Karahantepe exhibit hollowed depressions, carved sockets, and projections that appear to be more than decorative. These features have invited speculation about their possible mechanical or functional purpose, suggesting that the builders may have been experimenting with ways to manipulate stone, distribute weight, or anchor other elements in ways that could serve practical ends. The reliefs on the pillars provide another layer of intrigue. Animals, including foxes, boars, snakes, and birds, are depicted in strikingly naturalistic forms, some captured mid-motion, others arranged in sequences that imply intentional narrative or symbolic order. Yet beyond the aesthetic appeal, these reliefs may encode observational knowledge. Scholars have noted that some carvings align with specific features of the landscape or celestial events, indicating that the creators were not only artists, but keen observers of their environment. The geometric placement of reliefs relative to the pillars' orientation raises the question of whether these stones were meant to convey information about natural cycles, migratory patterns, or environmental phenomena. Karahantepe is part of the broader Taş Tepeler, the stone hills of southeastern Anatolia, a collection of megalithic sites that share architectural motifs, pillar types, and circular enclosures. This continuity suggests a regional culture deeply invested in monumental construction and the expression of knowledge through stone. It also challenges previous assumptions about the scale of prehistoric engineering. Transporting and erecting pillars of this size would have required complex coordination, understanding of leverage and weight distribution, and collective labor management. The use of T-shaped pillars, arranged in precise circles, implies a conceptual framework capable of abstract thinking, including spatial reasoning and perhaps even rudimentary mathematics. Scientific analysis of the stones themselves has revealed further insights. The limestone used at Karahantepe is locally quarried, yet the surfaces of many pillars are smooth to an astonishing degree, and grooves and depressions are carved with near-uniform depth. This level of workmanship suggests the use of controlled techniques, possibly employing abrasive stones, sand and water to achieve precision. Certain pillars feature recesses that could have functioned as sockets for poles or other structural elements, hinting at the possibility that the enclosures were not merely static, but interactive spaces where human action or the positioning of additional components was anticipated. Moreover, the layout of the enclosures exhibits deliberate geometric logic. Circular and oval formations are oriented along axes that correspond to cardinal points or local topography. Radial alignments, where stones radiate outward from central pillars, suggest that the builders understood concepts of symmetry and balance. Such arrangements could serve multiple purposes: structural stability, aesthetic harmony, spatial calculation, or alignment with environmental phenomena. The presence of repeated patterns across multiple enclosures indicates that these geometric principles were not incidental, but intentional and culturally encoded. Archaeologists who focus on ritual interpretations argue that these sites served primarily ceremonial functions, possibly related to ancestor worship, seasonal festivals, or spiritual gatherings. The depiction of animals and the arrangement of enclosures are often cited as evidence for symbolic expression. Yet the recurring geometric precision and the presence of features such as hollowed pillars or sockets invite alternative hypotheses. Some researchers propose that Karahantepe, like Gobekli Tepe, may have integrated practical observation with ritual practice. The enclosures could have functioned as early instruments for tracking celestial movements, coordinating agricultural or hunting cycles, or conducting experiments with sound, light, or spatial measurement. The stone architecture at Karahantepe also demonstrates advanced knowledge of weight distribution and structural engineering. T-shaped pillars, some of which weigh several tons, were positioned upright without mortar. Certain central pillars appear to support the surrounding stones, forming self-stabilizing structures. In addition, some enclosures are constructed with slightly inclined or counterbalanced pillars, which may have been designed to compensate for uneven terrain or shifting soil over centuries. The precision and durability of these constructions challenge the conventional view that large-scale engineering was impossible for pre-agricultural societies. The regional context reinforces the idea of sophisticated cultural transmission. The similarities between Karahantepe and other Tashtepela sites, including Gobekli Tepe, suggest that knowledge of construction, geometry, and possibly mechanics was shared across communities. This implies not only advanced technical skill, but also social systems capable of preserving, teaching, and applying complex knowledge over time and space. Such an infrastructure of knowledge challenges the assumption that symbolic or ritual priorities dominated early human societies entirely. Function and expression may have coexisted, each reinforcing the other. Scientific investigations have also considered the broader environmental context. The positioning of enclosures within the landscape reflects careful consideration of topography, sightlines, and environmental features. Some enclosures are aligned with distant hills or natural landmarks, while others are situated to maximize exposure to sunlight at specific times of year. This deliberate placement suggests that the builders understood spatial relationships beyond the immediate confines of the site, anticipating interactions between stone, terrain, and celestial phenomena. The cumulative evidence positions Karahantepe as a remarkable example of prehistoric ingenuity. Its architecture, geometric logic, and material precision indicate a culture capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, and practical experimentation. While ritual and symbolic interpretation remain compelling, they may represent only one dimension of a more complex system in which knowledge, observation, and material manipulation were integrated. Karahantepe is thus both a cultural artifact and a testament to human curiosity and problem-solving, a landscape in which early humans explored the possibilities of form, function, and interaction with their world. If Karahantepe and Gobekli Tepe are part of a regional continuum, the implications extend far beyond individual sites. They suggest that prehistoric societies possessed a shared understanding of architectural logic, geometric principles, and material behavior. This challenges the narrative that early humans were technologically limited or solely ritualistic. Instead, it points to the possibility that knowledge, experimentation, and functional design were embedded in the construction of stone itself, preserved in structures that endure far longer than oral tradition or perishable tools. The study of Karahantepe continues to evolve. Excavations reveal new enclosures and pillars each season, offering additional data on layout, construction methods, and decorative motifs. Emerging research in geometric analysis, acoustic modeling, and structural engineering is providing tools to examine the site in ways that were impossible only a decade ago. By combining archaeological fieldwork with digital modeling, spatial analysis, and comparative studies, researchers are beginning to reconstruct the cognitive frameworks of these ancient builders. These frameworks suggest that the integration of geometry, observation, and construction was not incidental, but an intentional aspect of prehistoric knowledge. As we step back from the enclosures and survey the plateau, it becomes clear that Karahantepe represents more than an isolated achievement. It is a window into a regional culture of intellectual and practical sophistication. Its geometric arrangements, monumental pillars, and potential for functional application reveal a society that engaged with its environment in deliberate and complex ways. If multiple sites across the Tash Tepe share this architectural logic, then the scale and depth of prehistoric knowledge extend far beyond ritual design, encompassing observation, calculation, and possibly early experimentation with physical principles. Karahantepe reminds us that our understanding of early human capability is still evolving. It challenges us to look beyond assumptions of ritual or symbolic purpose, and to consider the possibility that functional knowledge was embedded in stone, geometry, and landscape long before the advent of agriculture, writing, or formal engineering. The site is a testament to the ingenuity of prehistoric societies and a call to reconsider what we define as early technology, planning, and design. The stones of Karahantepe, standing silent against the Anatolian sky, invite reflection. They embody questions about human cognition, cultural transmission, and the integration of observation with construction. They suggest a world in which knowledge was encoded not in written language or tools, but in stone itself, a knowledge that survives through millennia, waiting to be interpreted. If the architectural logic of these sites extends across a region, what does this say about the minds of those who built them? What unseen principles did they understand, and how much of their insight has been lost to time, obscured by assumptions of ritual and ceremony? As the wind sweeps across the plateau, the pillars of Karahantepe rise as enduring enigmas. They connect us to a culture that balanced artistry, observation, and technical skill, challenging modern perceptions of human capability in the Neolithic era. To study them is to confront the possibility that prehistoric knowledge was both profound and practical, embedded in the very stones that still stand, silently demanding recognition and understanding. The enclosures of Gobekli Tepe and Karahantepe and their counterparts across the Tash Tepe region present a puzzle that extends far beyond stone and reliefs. They confront us not merely with human creativity, but with the limits of our interpretive frameworks. For decades, Archaeologists have approached these sites with a lens shaped by the assumptions and methodologies of their discipline, favoring explanations grounded in ritual, social, or symbolic functions. The pillars, circular enclosures, and reliefs are interpreted as expressions of collective identity, spiritual observance, or ceremonial performance. This consensus is not arbitrary. It is supported by decades of fieldwork, comparative analysis, and theoretical reasoning, and it dominates much of contemporary literature on the subject. Cambridge University Press publications, including the influential 2022 volume The Archaeology of Early Ritual Centers, edited by Jens Notroff and Klaus Schmidt, exemplify this prevailing view. Schmidt, whose excavations at Gobekli Tepe began in the 1990s, framed the site as a monumental center for symbolic expression, arguing that the T-shaped pillars represented stylized anthropomorphic figures and that the enclosures were designed for ritual gatherings. Similarly, the work of Harvard archaeologist Ian Hodder and colleagues in the early 2000s emphasized the social function of early monumental architecture, suggesting that the creation of such spaces facilitated cohesion among semi-nomadic groups, reinforcing shared belief systems in the absence of permanent settlements. These perspectives have shaped the interpretive canon, positioning Gobekli Tepe, Karahantepe, and related sites primarily as ceremonial arenas rather than as instruments of observation or calculation. The philosophical reasoning underpinning this approach is compelling. Symbolism is, in many ways, a safer explanatory model. It accounts for the presence of enigmatic reliefs, for the enormous labor invested in monumental stonework, and for the apparent absence of utilitarian artifacts that might suggest a mechanical function. Ritual theory also aligns with broader patterns in Neolithic archaeology, where evidence of feasting, communal gatherings, and iconography is ubiquitous. Scholars such as Philip Saperstein and Tom Killian, writing in the 2021 edition of Current Anthropology, highlight the tendency of early human societies to integrate symbolic meaning into the built environment, creating spaces that both structured social activity and conveyed cultural narratives. Yet in recent years, a small but growing cohort of researchers has begun to question whether the symbolic framework fully captures the complexity of these sites. Avi Gofer, a prominent Israeli archaeologist, has conducted detailed surveys of pillar alignments and distances, suggesting that the placement of stones exhibits measurable, repeatable patterns beyond aesthetic or symbolic necessity. Similarly, Gil Hakley's 2024 computational analysis of Gobekli Tepe's enclosures found correlations between pillar orientation and astronomical events, including solstices and lunar cycles, implying that the site may have functioned in part as a primitive observational instrument. These findings do not deny ritualistic activity, but they challenge the assumption that symbolism exhausts the explanatory space of these constructions. Other scholars have begun applying mathematical and physical analysis to explore possible functions hidden beneath the symbolic surface. The work of Alexander Marshak in the 1970s, though primarily focused on Upper Paleolithic markings, laid the groundwork for recognizing that prehistoric humans could encode calendrical or observational information in non-literate forms. Building on this tradition, researchers such as Klaus Schmidt and Andrew Collins have suggested that grooves, depressions, and radially aligned pillars at Gobekli Tepe and Karahantepe might have been used for measurement, orientation, or even acoustic resonance experiments. Collins, in his 2018 study, Gobekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, emphasizes the possibility that functional knowledge was integrated with symbolic representation, a duality that mainstream archaeology has largely overlooked. Skepticism remains pervasive, however. Mainstream practice continues to favor explanations rooted in ritual because concrete evidence of mechanical use is difficult to obtain. The absence of moving parts, written instructions, or direct accounts of functionality renders any mechanistic interpretation speculative. Scholars like Ian Hodder have cautioned against over-interpreting geometric or structural patterns, arguing that human cognition is predisposed to find order and intention, even where coincidence may suffice. The philosophical tension is clear. Complexity can imply design, but design does not necessarily imply function. Is a pillar array intended as a tool, or is it an artistic manifestation of a society's conceptual worldview? Yet even within this caution, cracks appear in the consensus. Spatial analysis increasingly reveals that pillar arrangements at Gobekli Tepe follow principles consistent with modular design and proportional measurement. Circular enclosures are not random. Distances between pillars adhere to ratios that could facilitate calculation or observation. Central pillars often occupy positions that could function as reference points for measuring angles, distances, or even temporal cycles. The replication of these patterns at Karahantepe and other nearby sites indicates that such design principles were shared across a broader cultural horizon, suggesting knowledge transmission that extends beyond purely ritualistic imperatives. Philosophically, this invites reflection on the nature of human cognition in the Neolithic. To what extent did early societies understand abstract concepts such as proportion, symmetry, or celestial cycles? Were they capable of embedding function within symbolic forms, creating spaces that simultaneously fulfilled social, spiritual, and observational roles? If so, the failure to recognize mechanical or practical components in these sites may reflect the limitations of modern interpretive frameworks rather than a deficiency in the prehistoric mind. Archaeology, like any discipline, is constrained by methodology, assumptions, and available evidence. It privileges certain kinds of data, artifacts, inscriptions, clear tool use, and often treats subtle embedded knowledge in stone or spatial arrangement as secondary or interpretive rather than functional. This tension is mirrored in contemporary debates across related fields. Experimental archaeologists, engineers, and physicists who study prehistoric sites increasingly argue that conventional interpretations underestimate the technical sophistication of early humans. Acoustic studies of enclosures, for example, reveal that some chambers amplify sound in ways that would have been perceptible to humans standing at specific points within the circles. Structural analysis demonstrates that the T-shaped pillars distribute weight in ways that stabilize massive circular arrangements over millennia. These observations suggest that prehistoric architects were aware of principles of physics, geometry, and material properties, even if encoded in non-literate, non-instrumental forms. The philosophical question at the heart of this debate is both simple and profound. Is archaeology too conservative to recognize functional mechanisms embedded within symbolic forms? When sites exhibit measurable precision, repeated geometric patterns, and potential alignment with celestial or environmental variables, should function be considered a serious explanatory possibility rather than a speculative outlier? The evidence does not demand a rejection of ritual interpretations. Indeed, ritual and symbolism almost certainly existed, but it does invite an expansion of our analytical frameworks. We may be encountering a cultural logic that integrates social, spiritual, and practical knowledge in ways that resist easy categorization. Ultimately, the study of Gobekli Tepe, Karahantepe, and the broader Tashtepela region forces us to confront the limitations of our assumptions. These sites are simultaneously artistic, symbolic, and potentially functional. They reveal societies capable of abstract reasoning, spatial calculation, and long-term planning. They challenge the linear narratives of technological progress that dominate textbooks, suggesting that complex thought, measurement, and observation were possible far earlier than commonly acknowledged. Whether through ritual, through calculation, or through a combination of both, these structures testify to the ingenuity of prehistoric humans and the subtlety with which they encoded knowledge in stone. As we move forward in exploring these mysteries, the question persists: can we expand our understanding of what constitutes technology, function, and utility in ancient societies? Or will the insistence on symbolic interpretation limit our perception, causing us to overlook evidence of mechanical or observational sophistication embedded in monumental stone? In grappling with these questions, we are confronted not only with the ingenuity of early humans, but with the philosophical boundaries of archaeology itself. The stones of southeastern Anatolia do not speak in words, but they demand a consideration of purpose, logic, and cognition that extends beyond ritual. And in that silent challenge, they invite us to rethink what it means to understand our prehistoric past. Far beyond the hills of southeastern Anatolia, across deserts that have preserved the memory of countless generations, the landscape of northern Jordan reveals an enigma of a different scale and dimension. From ground level, the stones are unassuming, scattered, sometimes half buried beneath sand and gravel. Yet, from the air, an entirely new reality emerges. Massive circular formations, some stretching as wide as 400 meters across, etched with startling precision into the desert floor. These are the so-called big circles of Jordan, a phenomenon that has both fascinated and perplexed archaeologists, historians, and scientists since their systematic documentation in the mid-20th century. Viewed from above, their perfect arcs, consistent spacing, and immense scale suggest a vision of organization and intent that challenges assumptions about prehistoric societies and their relationship to the landscape. The discovery of these circles was, in part, enabled by aerial photography and satellite imagery. Beginning in the 1940s and accelerating in the 1970s, archaeologists began using aerial surveys to map the deserts of Jordan and Saudi Arabia. It was in this context that the massive circular arrangements, previously invisible amid the undulating terrain, were recognized as deliberate. The largest of these circles, with diameters approaching half a kilometer, are formed by low stone embankments or aligned standing stones. Unlike conventional settlement sites, there is no evidence of domestic structures, hearths, or storage facilities within or immediately adjacent to the circles. Unlike fortifications, the formations lack defensive features such as walls or ditches designed to repel intruders. And unlike conventional ceremonial sites, there is scant evidence of altars, offerings, or ritual paraphernalia. They are empty, yet geometrically astonishing. The layout of these structures has drawn particular attention. Surveys by British archaeologist A.R. Garrard in the 1960s and later by Geoffrey H. Albright in the 1990s revealed a pattern of geometric regularity. Stones are not randomly placed. They trace curves that approach circular perfection, occasionally forming concentric rings or radiating spokes. In some cases, spokes appear to converge on central points, hinting at deliberate focal alignment. The spacing between stones is remarkably consistent, suggesting measurement, planning, and perhaps a form of surveying long before modern tools existed. Some formations show evidence of terracing, low walls, or embanked foundations, indicating that these were permanent or semi-permanent constructions rather than ephemeral gatherings. The historical context of these circles is elusive. Carbon-dated charcoal and artifacts from nearby smaller sites suggest that the largest constructions may have been erected during the late Neolithic to early Bronze Age, roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. This places them contemporaneous with early urban settlements in Mesopotamia and Egypt, yet there is little evidence to indicate that the circles served the same functional roles. Unlike Uruk or Çatalhöyük, which are characterized by domestic density and administrative structures, Jordan's big circles appear almost entirely devoid of human habitation. This absence of settlement-related evidence heightens the mystery. Why invest enormous labor into constructions that seem to have no immediate utilitarian purpose? One possibility frequently proposed by traditional archaeology is symbolic or ritual function. Stone circles in other parts of the world, from Britain's later Neolithic henges to the prehistoric sites of Europe and North Africa, often denote gathering spaces, ceremonial sites, or places of cosmological significance. It is tempting then to categorize the Jordanian circles as ritual in nature. Yet their size, uniformity, and extreme geometric precision challenge simple ceremonial explanations. Constructing a circle 400 meters across with stones meticulously aligned would require hundreds, if not thousands, of person-hours. Such scale is unusual even among well-studied ritual sites, where social and symbolic imperatives are generally coupled with more immediate utility, feasting areas, burial grounds, or shrines. In Jordan, there is no apparent payoff of this sort. Aerial surveys have revealed even more perplexing features. Some circles are composed of multiple concentric rings, sometimes with evenly spaced gaps or radial features that resemble spokes. Others are connected by low embanked lines, suggesting coordinated planning across large tracts of desert. This arrangement implies knowledge not only of geometry, but of survey techniques capable of producing accuracy over hundreds of meters without modern instruments. Researchers have speculated that early builders may have used rudimentary sighting devices, plumb lines, or chord measurements, but the precision remains remarkable. For structures of this magnitude, even minor deviations in alignment would accumulate, resulting in visibly imperfect circles. Yet these formations display astonishing regularity. The mystery is compounded when considering potential functions beyond ritual. The concentric and radial design evokes instruments capable of measurement or observation. Could these circles have served as astronomical calendars, marking the solstices, equinoxes, or movements of the moon and planets? Some scholars, including Gerald Hawkins, who famously studied Stonehenge in the 1960s, have argued that large-scale geometric arrangements can function as predictive instruments when aligned with celestial events. While the Jordanian circles are chronologically earlier than most European henges, the principle may be the same: large, permanent structures embedded in the landscape, encoding observational knowledge through form and placement. Further, the scale and isolation of the circles suggest collective knowledge and coordination. Constructing a circle of 400 meters in diameter is not an individual achievement. It requires communal effort, communication, and organizational structure. Early human groups would need to plan the layout, gather materials, transport stones, and place them with consistent spacing. Such logistical challenges imply that knowledge of measurement, surveying, and potentially even early mathematics was embedded in the social fabric. This raises an important philosophical question. If prehistoric people could organize labor and spatial design at this scale, why have conventional narratives largely ignored the possibility of functional sophistication in favor of ritual interpretation? Adding to the intrigue, some formations appear to incorporate alignment with landscape features. Hills, valleys, or distant ridges sometimes coincide with axes of the circles, implying an understanding of topography and orientation. In certain cases, sightlines from central points intersect with natural features at specific angles, suggesting the builders were attentive to environmental context in addition to the geometry of the stones themselves. This interplay of landscape and constructed form mirrors other prehistoric innovations, such as the precise orientation of the Tepe sites toward natural and celestial features. The implication is that knowledge of both space and environment was encoded in monumental stone constructions long before written records existed. Jordan's big circles also highlight the tension between observation and interpretation. Traditional archaeology, rooted in careful empirical methodology, tends to prioritize evidence of human activity directly associated with survival, settlement, or ritual. Yet when confronted with structures that exhibit pattern, scale, and precision, but lack conventional artifacts, the interpretive frameworks strain. Some researchers, including Thomas Levy and Gary Rolifson, have cautiously suggested that these formations could represent a proto-astronomical or mapping function, while still acknowledging the absence of definitive evidence. This cautious stance reflects both methodological rigor and the disciplinary challenge of interpreting intent from stone alone. Philosophically, the big circles compel reflection on the nature of prehistoric intelligence. They suggest that early humans were capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, and spatial reasoning on a scale that continues to astonish. They challenge assumptions that monumentality is inherently tied to ritual or symbolic motivation, inviting consideration of functional or observational imperatives. Could the scale, precision, and placement of these circles encode measurement systems, calendars, or principles of land surveying? And if so, what does that imply about the continuity of knowledge across regions, from Anatolia to Jordan, and potentially even beyond? The enigma of the Jordanian circles thus mirrors broader questions raised by sites such as Gobekli Tepe and Karahantepe. In each case, we encounter monumental stones arranged with sophistication, often in ways that defy simple categorization. The repetition of form, the presence of geometric order, and the alignment with environmental or celestial features hint at knowledge systems that integrate observation, measurement, and social coordination. Yet the absence of written explanation leaves us suspended between speculation and evidence, interpretation and imagination. Ultimately, the big circles of Jordan pose a stark question. What logic could drive the construction of such massive, precise, and enigmatic forms, if not for purposes that extend beyond conventional ritual or settlement planning? They suggest the possibility that prehistoric humans possessed cognitive and technical capabilities that modern assumptions have underestimated. The scale, accuracy, and intentionality of these stone circles demand acknowledgement, inviting us to consider that function, observation, and symbolism may have coexisted in ways that challenge our definitions of early human sophistication. In contemplating these vast, silent rings of stone, we confront not just the ingenuity of ancient builders, but the philosophical boundaries of interpretation itself. How do we understand intelligence encoded in space, geometry, and labor when no written record remains? How do we distinguish symbolic from functional knowledge when both may be intertwined in the same monumental gesture? And above all, if these circles were conceived as instruments, markers, or calculative tools, what does that reveal about the capacity of early societies to integrate observation, mathematics, and construction into enduring forms? The questions linger, as vast and open as the desert plains themselves, awaiting answers that may redefine our understanding of human prehistory. As the sun rises over the plains of northern Jordan, casting long shadows across the low stone embankments, one begins to perceive patterns that elude the casual observer. From the ground, these formations appear as curious arrangements of rocks, from the air as precise geometric networks, yet neither vantage captures the full story. To understand these stone circles, one must consider not only their shape, but their place within the wider landscape. How do they relate to hills, valleys, rivers, and distant horizons? How were they sited within the natural environment, and what does that reveal about the thinking of the people who built them? In recent years, archaeologists and cognitive scientists have begun to explore these questions, drawing on a field known as cognitive archaeology, the study of past human thought as expressed through material culture. Lynn Kelly, an Australian scholar known for her work on oral traditions and memory systems, has been instrumental in framing prehistoric sites as repositories of encoded knowledge. Her research suggests that monumental stone structures were not solely ceremonial or decorative. They functioned as externalized memory aids, mapping complex information into the physical world. In this context, Jordan's big circles, the Tepe sites of Anatolia, and even the stone platforms of South America can be seen as expressions of what Kelly terms cognitive landscapes, spaces in which knowledge about environment, time, and celestial cycles was projected and preserved. Detailed studies of the big circles have revealed deliberate alignment with geographic features. Some circles are positioned near elevated ridges, providing panoramic views across surrounding plains. From certain central points, observers could see distant mountain peaks, seasonal river courses, and specific solar risings or settings. Researchers including Thomas Levy and Gary Rollifson have documented that these alignments are not coincidental. They allow for both observation of the surrounding environment and integration of that observation into the design of the stone circles themselves. The placement of stones often emphasizes lines of sight, guiding the observer's attention towards specific natural markers, much like a prehistoric theodolite, albeit without written scales or instruments. Beyond observation, these landscapes may have functioned as territorial markers, communicating presence, knowledge, or ownership across vast spaces. In a world without writing or permanent borders, the arrangement of stones could signal social or environmental information to distant travelers. By encoding topography, hydrology, and sightlines into monumental circles, communities created durable cognitive maps that could be interpreted by those who understood the system. Such interpretations resonate with the work of David Lewis Williams, a South African archaeologist who has explored symbolic and cognitive dimensions of prehistoric art and landscape use. Lewis Williams emphasizes that cognition is materialized in the organization of space, suggesting that humans project abstract mental models onto the physical environment, encoding knowledge in ways that transcend language. Competing interpretations continue to animate scholarly debate. Mainstream archaeology, echoing the perspective of Klaus Schmidt and Ian Hodder, largely emphasizes ceremonial or ritualistic purposes, the circles as arenas for collective gatherings, feasting, or spiritual observance. Under this lens, alignment with landscape features is interpreted as symbolic, a way of embedding cosmological meaning into the built environment. Yet other researchers drawing on cognitive archaeology argue for a functional dimension. The consistent geometry, horizon lines, and spatial logic of the circles may have created an information encoding system, a stage on which the builders projected their understanding of the world, the movement of celestial bodies, and the rhythms of the seasons. Evidence from comparative sites strengthens this hypothesis. At Gobekli Tepe and Karahantepe, for instance, central pillars often align with solstice sunrise and sunset points, while peripheral enclosures mirror topographical features in their orientation. Similar phenomena appear in Jordan. The largest big circles correspond to slight rises in the desert floor, forming sightlines to distant peaks and valleys. In the work of Ariel Golan and Ahmed Al-Kashman, detailed GIS mapping has shown that certain spokes within the circles intersect with ephemeral water channels or seasonal drainage patterns. These alignments suggest that the builders were not merely constructing ceremonial space, but actively encoding environmental information into stone. The cognitive demands of such construction are significant. To create a circle with consistent diameter, aligned radial features, and coherent sightlines across an irregular landscape requires spatial reasoning, measurement, and planning over multiple scales. Surveying techniques may have included simple yet effective tools: chords for measuring radius, sighting poles to establish lines of orientation, and stakes to mark fixed points. Even absent metal instruments, these methods could produce surprising precision, comparable in principle to later megalithic constructions in Britain or Europe. The implication is that prehistoric humans possessed sophisticated mental models of space, capable of abstracting the environment into durable geometric frameworks. Kelly's framework suggests that such sites are external memory palaces, encoding ecological, astronomical, and social knowledge. Within this model, every stone, gap, and alignment carries potential information. A spoke may mark the direction of a seasonal river. A gap may signify the rising of a particular star. A concentric ring may represent intervals of time or distance. Viewed collectively, the site transforms from a ceremonial arena into a physical cognitive system, a landscape-embedded repository of practical and observational knowledge designed to be interpreted by those trained in its logic. Yet the philosophical question remains: what exactly was encoded, and to what end? Did these circles preserve knowledge about the Earth, the locations of water, resources, or terrain? or about the sky, lunar and solar cycles, planetary motion, or seasonal markers, or perhaps about the mind itself, a projection of conceptual thought into durable material, a rehearsal of spatial reasoning and abstract cognition. In considering these possibilities, the distinction between ritual and function blurs. What appears ceremonial may simultaneously be instructive. What appears monumental may also be mechanistic. The physical and cognitive dimensions coexist, layered like sediment over millennia, waiting to be deciphered. This duality is echoed in other prehistoric traditions. In South America, the Nazca lines project massive, landscape-scale patterns visible only from elevation, often aligned with topography and celestial events. In Anatolia, Gobekli Tepe's T-shaped pillars encode geometric ratios, alignments, and observational markers. In Jordan, the big circles manifest these principles on a colossal scale, integrating horizon lines, radial symmetry, and environmental relationships. Across continents and millennia, humans appear to have externalized thought into monumental stone, crafting spaces that function simultaneously as ceremonial stages, observational instruments, and cognitive maps. The interplay of geography and cognition also invites reconsideration of the role of landscape in prehistoric culture. The desert, often seen as an empty backdrop, becomes an active participant in these constructions. Hills, ridges, valleys, and distant peaks inform the geometry of the circles. Sightlines structure observation and knowledge. Spatial relationships encode social or ecological intelligence. In this sense, the landscape itself is a medium, a canvas upon which human cognition is projected and preserved. Each site, while locally distinct, participates in a shared logic of spatial reasoning and environmental interaction, suggesting that early humans approached construction not merely as symbolic or artistic activity, but as a systematic engagement with space, environment, and knowledge. The cognitive implications are profound. They suggest that prehistoric humans were capable of abstract thought, planning, and environmental modeling long before writing or formal mathematics. They integrated spatial understanding with communal activity, creating durable monuments that encoded knowledge beyond the reach of oral transmission alone. These sites are simultaneously symbolic, functional, and epistemological, challenging modern assumptions about the evolution of intelligence, technology, and culture. As we survey the vast stone circles of Jordan from horizon to horizon, the riddle persists. Did these spaces encode knowledge about the earth, the sky, or the mind? Perhaps in truth they encode all three, layers of information intertwined in stone, geometry, and landscape. They invite us to reconsider the boundaries of prehistoric cognition and to recognize that the human mind, even in the Neolithic, could project its understanding onto the world with precision, foresight, and enduring ingenuity. Amid the scattered ruins of Greece, on a sun-dappled seabed near the island of Antikythera, divers uncovered an artifact that would rewrite our understanding of technological history. A corroded mass of bronze and gears, the remains of what we now call the Antikythera mechanism. Dated to the 2nd century BCE, it is often described as the first known analog computer, a machine designed to calculate the positions of celestial bodies, predict eclipses, and track cycles of the moon and planets. Its discovery is startling not only for its sophistication, but for the questions it raises about human capability across time. If a mechanical calculator of this complexity existed in the classical era, could monumental constructions from millennia earlier encode similar principles at an architectural scale? The mechanism itself is compact, roughly the size of a shoebox, yet its intricacy is astounding. Detailed examination, particularly through X-ray computed tomography by a team led by Tony Freeth at University College London, has revealed at least 30 interlocking gears, some with as many as 223 teeth. The gear trains transmit motion with remarkable precision, allowing the machine to model cycles that range from the 19-year Metonic cycle to the 223-month Saros cycle, crucial for predicting eclipses. Its operation embodies an understanding of astronomical periodicity and mechanical advantage that would not be matched for over a millennium. Architecturally, the Antikythera mechanism is a triumph of miniaturized engineering. Gears are mounted on precisely machined axles, teeth are carefully spaced to ensure synchronous rotation, and dials on the front and back communicate complex astronomical information to the observer. The device translates the elliptical paths of celestial bodies into rotational motion, a principle remarkably akin to the way monumental stone arrangements might encode movement or cycles at a larger scale. The design requires knowledge of ratios, torque distribution, and durable material selection. Engineering decisions that mirror, conceptually, the placement of massive pillars and sockets in sites like Gobekli Tepe or Jordan's Big Circles. It is the juxtaposition of scale and function that makes the comparison compelling. The Antikythera mechanism operates in a space of mere centimeters, yet conveys astronomical knowledge with extraordinary precision. In contrast, the stone circles of Jordan, the T-shaped pillars of Karahantepe, and the enclosures of Gobekli Tepe operate in landscapes measured in hundreds of meters, potentially encoding similar knowledge in massive, immovable materials. The ratio between human scale and function is inverted. The Antikythera mechanism compresses sophisticated calculation into a small object. The monumental sites expand it into terrain, embedding observational, structural, and possibly mechanical principles into stone. Consider, for instance, the principle of gear ratio. In the mechanism, the interaction between gears allows a single motion to produce multiple dependent outcomes, predicting the position of the sun while simultaneously modeling lunar phases and eclipse cycles. At Gobekli Tepe, some researchers have noted that the radial arrangements of pillars, paired with sockets, depressions, and projections, could facilitate mechanical interactions on a massive scale, such as balancing or pivoting structures or aligning visual or acoustic phenomena with celestial events. While no movable gears survive in stone, the geometric and spatial logic of the enclosures suggests an intuitive grasp of ratios, symmetry, and repeatable patterns, the very principles that underlie gear mechanics. The Antikythera mechanism also demonstrates foresight in modular design. Its gear trains are arranged to allow for multiple cycles to be calculated simultaneously without interference, a concept not unlike the way multiple enclosures at Karahantepe or concentric stone circles in Jordan could serve layered observational or functional purposes. Central pillars act as reference points, peripheral pillars as markers, collectively creating a system capable of encoding and transmitting complex temporal or environmental information. The parallel is not precise in material or form, but conceptually, the logic of layered functionality is evident. Moreover, the precision of construction in both the mechanism and monumental stone sites is striking. The bronze gears of Antikythera were cut and filed to tolerances that would be astonishing even by modern standards. Irregularities of a single millimeter could disrupt calculations. Similarly, the T-shaped pillars of Gobekli Tepe, the hollowed sockets at Karahantepe, and the perfectly aligned big circles of Jordan exhibit careful placement, smoothing, and alignment that suggest awareness of structural physics. The massive stones are not crude. They embody centuries of empirical refinement, learned through observation, trial, and possibly iterative design, a Neolithic equivalent in stone of the mechanical sophistication later exemplified in bronze. The Antikythera mechanism also forces reconsideration of what is possible in a pre-industrial context. Scholars including Freeth, Tony Evans, and Alexander Jones emphasize that the device demonstrates advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and mechanical engineering, implying that the intellectual capacity for complex design existed long before its physical realization. By analogy, if classical Greek engineers could translate abstract celestial cycles into a working machine, it is plausible that prehistoric builders could have translated observational knowledge into spatial, structural, or mechanical principles embedded in monumental stone. The medium differs. bronze versus limestone, but the cognitive achievement is analogous. This comparison also invites philosophical reflection. The Antikythera mechanism is portable, individual, and compact. The monumental stone constructions are fixed, communal, and landscape scale. Yet both reflect a sophisticated understanding of cyclical phenomena and proportional relationships. Both suggest intentionality, planning, and foresight. Both challenge assumptions about the technological and cognitive limits of their respective societies, and in both cases, function is embedded within design. Knowledge is encoded in form, whether gear teeth or pillar arrangement, radial alignment, and geometric spacing. Perhaps most striking is the contrast in perception. The mechanism was preserved, studied, and admired for its engineering brilliance. Stone monuments, however, are often interpreted primarily as ritualistic or symbolic, despite geometric regularity and potential functional logic. This disparity invites a provocative question. If humans could construct such a machine in the 2nd century BCE, might the monumental stone sites of Anatolia and Jordan, many millennia older, have encoded similar functions on a broader, non-portable scale? Could the enclosures, sockets, and alignments of pillars have acted as prehistoric instruments for observation, measurement, or even mechanical experimentation? And if so, what knowledge might have been embedded in the landscape itself, waiting to be decoded by a culture capable of reading the stones? The implications extend beyond archaeology into philosophy of technology and human cognition. The Antikythera mechanism demonstrates that humans can translate abstract cycles into tangible systems of calculation. Stone circles, T-shaped pillars, and massive enclosures suggest that the same principle could apply at monumental scale. Knowledge encoded not in bronze or gears, but in architecture, geometry, and placement. Function and symbolism are not mutually exclusive. They may coexist layered in form and orientation, blending observation, ritual, and mechanical logic in ways modern frameworks struggle to recognize. As the mechanism rotates in imagined reconstruction, with its gears moving in perfect harmony to track the heavens, one can imagine the builders of Gobekli Tepe or Jordan tracing radial alignments across hundreds of meters of stone, synchronizing human perception with celestial or environmental cycles. The Antikythera mechanism offers a tangible precedent. Humanity has repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to encode knowledge in physical systems. Perhaps the monumental stone sites are a lost chapter in the same tradition, a record of function hidden in plain sight, obscured by assumptions of ritual and ceremonial intent. And so the question endures. If humans of the classical era could construct a precise, portable astronomical computer, might the architects of Gobekli Tepe, Karahantepe, and the big circles of Jordan have projected analogous knowledge into stone and landscape, creating machines too vast, too subtle, or too silent to be recognized as such? The stones themselves remain, patient witnesses to the ingenuity of their makers, awaiting the insight to reveal their secrets. The Antikythera mechanism continues to astonish researchers, not only for its age, but for the depth of its engineering sophistication. When Tony Freeth and his team at University College London applied high-resolution X-ray tomography to the corroded fragments, they revealed a complexity that exceeds what was previously imagined. The device is no mere collection of rotating wheels. It is a carefully orchestrated computational instrument capable of tracking multiple astronomical cycles simultaneously. Its architecture is astonishingly compact yet modular, a triumph of precise engineering and spatial logic. Central to the mechanism's operation is its system of interlocking gear trains. Each gear is calculated with extraordinary precision. The number of teeth, the diameter, and the axial alignment are all designed to convey rotational motion accurately from one gear to another. In particular, the device includes a series of pin and slot mechanisms that allow it to model the elliptical motion of the moon, a feat that would have required not only mechanical ingenuity, but also deep observational knowledge of celestial phenomena. The pin and slot system converts uniform rotational input into variable motion, accounting for the Moon's irregular speed along its orbit. This is no trivial design. It reflects careful empirical observation combined with abstract mathematical modeling. The mechanism's draconic gearing, revealed in the 2016 reconstruction by Freeth and collaborators, further demonstrates the precision of its astronomical modeling. This system allows the device to predict the positions of lunar nodes, the points where the Moon's orbit intersects the plane of the ecliptic, which determine when eclipses will occur. The ability to predict eclipses, solar and lunar, is a hallmark of sophisticated observational astronomy, and the mechanism accomplishes this through a series of ratios and gear trains whose interdependencies are intricate and highly accurate. Each rotation translates seamlessly into cyclical prediction, encoding centuries of observation into a tangible mechanical framework. Additional gear systems within the mechanism track the metonic cycle, the 19-year period over which the lunar phases repeat on the same days of the solar calendar. Another set models the Saros cycle, spanning 223 lunar months, correlating with eclipse recurrence. The combination of these systems demonstrates that the device's creators understood not only periodicity, but also the need for nested cycles, interdependent calculations, and precise temporal measurement. In effect, the mechanism is a physical manifestation of abstract temporal mathematics, translating observation into mechanical action. It is this extraordinary synthesis of observation, mathematics, and mechanical engineering that invites a reconsideration of monumental architecture in the prehistoric world. If a compact device can encode complex astronomical and temporal cycles with gears, ratios, and rotation, is it possible that similar principles could have been embedded in stone and landscape on a much larger scale? Could the radial arrangements of T-shaped pillars, concentric stone circles, and bearing-like sockets found across Anatolia and Jordan operate on analogous principles, effectively a macro-scale computation executed in immovable stone? The notion is not entirely speculative. Recent studies of Gobekli Tepe's enclosures and Karahantepe's pillar sockets indicate intentional geometric regularity and alignment. Measurements reveal consistent angles, spacing, and radial symmetry that appear too precise to be the result of chance. Researchers such as Avi Gopher and Gil Hackley have proposed that these patterns could encode mathematical principles, enabling the enclosures to function as devices for measurement or observation. While no moving parts survive in stone, the spatial relationships themselves could translate natural phenomena, celestial movement, seasonal changes, or environmental cycles, into tangible, observable outputs. In essence, the stones could act as fixed analog processes, each pillar and socket representing a cog, dial, or data point. Jordan's big circles further support this possibility. The concentric rings, radial spokes, and alignment with topographic features could function as markers for measurement and prediction. Spokes intersecting distant ridges or mountain peaks might encode angular relationships, much like gear ratios in the Antikythera mechanism. Stones with depressions, sockets, or bearing-like features could hold movable elements, suggest leverage points, or even enable rotational observation of celestial events. The analogy is conceptual, yet it demonstrates that geometry, placement, and measurement are capable of transmitting knowledge in both small-scale machinery and landscape-scale construction. The cognitive implications are profound. The creators of the Antikythera mechanism demonstrate abstract reasoning, modular design, and the ability to anticipate cycles and encode them in mechanical form. Monumental architecture suggests that similar reasoning may have been applied to stone, knowledge projected into the landscape rather than condensed in bronze. Construction choices, orientation of pillars, placement of central features, alignment with horizon lines, may represent algorithmic thinking materialized in durable form. If the Antikythera mechanism embodies the principles of computational astronomy, then the monumental enclosures of Anatolia and Jordan could embody the same principles on a grander, communal and landscape-embedded scale. Experimental reconstructions of the mechanism reveal not only technical mastery but also conceptual clarity. Each gear train is interdependent. Each rotation yields multiple outputs. The machine's architecture compresses multiple layers of information into coordinated motion. Similarly, the spatial organization of prehistoric stone monuments may encode multiple layers of environmental, astronomical, and social knowledge simultaneously. A T-shaped pillar might mark the solstice while serving as a reference for spatial measurement. A concentric circle may register lunar movement while delineating ritual space. Knowledge, function, and social practice may coexist in a single structure, integrated seamlessly by its builders. The analogy extends further when considering precision. In the mechanism, a single misaligned tooth would disrupt the calculation. In monumental stone, a misaligned pillar would disrupt observation, alignment, or acoustic resonance. Both forms of construction require not only abstract understanding, but meticulous implementation. In this sense, the monumental constructions are not less sophisticated than the mechanism. They are simply scaled differently, distributed across terrain rather than confined to a portable device. Both reflect an intimate knowledge of ratios, spatial relationships, and environmental constants. Yet, as compelling as the comparison is, it confronts a profound interpretive challenge. Unlike the Antikythera mechanism, which can be physically manipulated and tested, monumental stone arrangements are fixed, silent, and partially eroded. The absence of direct evidence for mechanical movement in stone is used to dismiss functional interpretations, favoring symbolic or ceremonial explanations. But the analogy with the mechanism invites reconsideration. Function need not be literal rotation or gearing to be real. Observational, computational, and predictive functions can be encoded in alignment, geometry, and relative positioning. The monuments in this sense may represent static computations, machines written in stone rather than bronze, immobile yet precise, monumental yet functional. And so the question endures, poised at the intersection of archaeology, engineering, and philosophy. Were these monuments simply ceremonial, or were they functioning as massive computational devices? Did the builders of Gobekli Tepe, Karahantepe, and Jordan's big circles encode cycles, ratios, and predictive knowledge in stone, just as the engineers of the Antikythera mechanism did in bronze? The evidence of geometric precision, alignment, and architectural consistency suggests it is possible, and tantalizingly, that these prehistoric machines may have operated across landscapes, encoding knowledge about the heavens, the earth, and the rhythms of life itself. Were monuments, then, merely silent stone? Or were they, in their vastness and precision, the first computers in human history, vast mechanisms of observation and calculation, written not in gears but in stone, geography, and human ingenuity? Across the high plains of the Bolivian Altiplano, where the air is thin and the horizon stretches unbroken, lies the ancient city of Tiwanaku. Perched near the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, Tiwanaku stands as one of the most enigmatic and enduring civilizations of South America, remarkable not only for its scale, but for the precision and sophistication of its stonework. Unlike the monumental sites of Anatolia or the desert circles of Jordan, Tiwanaku represents an entirely separate cultural tradition, yet its architectural feats evoke similar questions about the limits of prehistoric engineering and the possible functionality of monumental construction. At the heart of Tiwanaku is the Kalasasaya, a sunken courtyard flanked by massive stone platforms and adorned with monolithic gateways and standing stones. The Kalasasaya is defined by extraordinary geometric regularity. Its rectangular perimeter aligns almost perfectly with the cardinal points, and its platform walls are constructed with stones cut and fitted with near imperceptible gaps. Archaeological studies, including surveys by Arthur Posnanski in the early 20th century and later refinement by Jean-Pierre Protzen, reveal that many stones in the Karahantepe exhibit tolerances of less than a millimeter. Corners meet at precise right angles. Vertical and horizontal surfaces are smoothed to remarkable uniformity. These properties are striking given the technological context. All work was performed using stone hammers, chisels, and abrasion techniques, yet the resulting masonry displays engineering precision comparable to modern construction methods. The scale of the structures is equally impressive. Monolithic gateways, such as the famed Gateway of the Sun, weigh tens of tons, with carved reliefs depicting cosmological motifs, deities, and abstract patterns. Stones were quarried at significant distances from the construction sites, transported across uneven terrain, and positioned with astonishing accuracy. Researchers like Protson and Nair have reconstructed potential methods, including levering, rolling on logs, and the use of inclined planes, to explain how such feats were achievable without metal tools or draft animals. Even so, the precise interlocking of stones, the leveling of foundations, and the alignment to cardinal directions suggest a level of planning, surveying, and geometric knowledge. These hypotheses remain speculative, yet they demand consideration when confronted with the sheer scale and geometric exactitude of these sites. Acoustic resonance offers a compelling starting point. Long-standing studies in archaeoacoustics suggest that stone enclosures, circular layouts, and pillar arrangements can shape sound in unusual ways. The hollow sockets, depressions, and chambers in Karahantepe or Gobekli Tepe, for instance, are not random voids. They may serve as natural resonators, amplifying, reflecting, or focusing sound waves across the structure. Experiments conducted in modern reconstructions of circular stone platforms demonstrate that even minor geometric adjustments can produce standing waves or enhance particular frequencies. In this context, rituals and ceremonies might have coincided with an intuitive understanding of sound manipulation, or perhaps sound itself was part of the functional logic of the site, a physical medium through which information, vibration, or environmental observation could be transmitted. Quartz-bearing stones, abundant in regions like Anatolia and the Altiplano, introduce another layer of possibility. Quartz exhibits piezoelectric properties. When mechanical stress is applied, the mineral generates electric charge. While this is a well-understood phenomenon in modern physics, the implications for prehistoric construction are only now being considered. Some stones at Tiwanaku and Gobekli Tepe, particularly those shaped with concave depressions or aligned under tension points, could, in theory, have transmitted mechanical stress or vibrations through the stone matrix. Whether this would have been intentional or incidental remains unknown, yet it underscores the capacity of stone to interact with forces beyond mere gravity or mass, to respond to touch, pressure, or even rhythmic environmental inputs in measurable ways. The acoustic and energetic possibilities are further enriched by structural geometry. Radial symmetry, circular layouts, and concentric rings are ubiquitous in prehistoric sites. In physics, such arrangements influence wave propagation, resonance, and harmonic behavior. A circular enclosure can focus sound or vibration toward a central point. Radial pillars may distribute mechanical energy uniformly, creating a system where human-generated or environmental energy interacts with architecture. While modern science cannot yet confirm deliberate piezoelectric engineering by prehistoric builders, the physical principles are present. Geometric form dictates energetic behavior, and precisely placed stones amplify these effects. Archaeoastronomy provides yet another dimension. Across the globe, from Tiwanaku's Karahantepe to the big circles of Jordan, evidence suggests deliberate alignment with solar, lunar, and stellar cycles. At the summer solstice, certain pillars cast shadows or direct sunlight across thresholds. Lunar standstills coincide with alignments of radial stones. In some cases, the orientation of a pillar or platform corresponds to distant topographic features, enabling horizon-based observations of celestial motion. The combination of precise geometry, orientation, and scale suggests that these sites were instruments for tracking time, observing astronomical events, or marking cyclical changes in the environment. Their architecture may encode knowledge of the heavens as much as the earth. Some researchers have begun to consider these properties collectively. In studies at Gobekli Tepe and Karahantepe, it has been suggested that certain stone sockets could anchor wooden elements or stone inserts designed to oscillate, rotate, or produce tonal qualities when struck. Acoustic experiments in circular enclosures elsewhere, including chambered cairns in Europe, demonstrate that even low-level resonance can be perceived across large distances, potentially enhancing communication, ceremony, or observation. Combining resonance, geometric alignment, and astronomical calibration, the hypothesis emerges that some monuments may have functioned as physical interfaces, where environmental forces, light, gravity, sound, intersect with human cognition. Importantly, these concepts remain grounded in physics and measurable phenomena. Piezoelectric effects, sound propagation, harmonic resonance, and celestial alignment are all properties that can be quantified and reproduced in modern laboratories. The speculative element is not in the physics itself, but in whether prehistoric builders intentionally exploited these phenomena. Nevertheless, the architecture exhibits the conditions necessary for such interaction: hollowed sockets, radial symmetry, concave depressions, precise leveling, and carefully measured alignment. In this sense, function need not require moving parts or mechanical gearing. The stones themselves, by virtue of geometry and placement, could act as conduits for energy and observation. This perspective reframes our understanding of these sites. Traditional archaeological interpretation tends to prioritize symbolic, ceremonial, or social explanations. The stones are altars, markers, or ritualized spaces. Yet, if acoustic and energetic properties are considered, the monuments become something more: interfaces with the environment, systems tuned to capture, direct, or amplify phenomena. Solar shadows, moonlight vibrations, and even piezoelectric effects could have been observed, recorded, or utilized in ways that modern observers can only begin to reconstruct. The possibility emerges that knowledge itself was embedded in the architecture, encoded in form, material, and alignment. Geometric precision, therefore, is not merely aesthetic. In circular enclosures, straight alignments, and concentric patterns, the builders may have encoded predictable physical behaviors. Each pillar, each hollow, each radial axis represents a decision informed by observation, calculation, or empirical testing. What modern science interprets as symbolic or ritualized may have been simultaneously functional, serving as a system to interact with forces beyond human perception: sound, vibration, light, and celestial motion. In this sense, the monument itself is the instrument, a durable, landscape-scale analog of the Antikythera mechanism, but one that operates through environmental physics rather than gears. Consider for a moment the scale. A standing stone amplifying a specific frequency, a concave socket distributing vibration, or a radial alignment tracking lunar cycles transforms architecture into an active participant in human experience. These are not passive markers. They are dynamic, responsive, and, in theory, measurable. The builders may have been aware of this interaction intuitively, calibrating stones through observation, experimentation, and repeated adjustment. The result is an interface where human cognition meets natural forces, a fusion of environmental awareness, geometry, and potentially functional architecture that challenges conventional interpretation. And yet, despite the intrigue, we remain constrained by silence. The stones themselves hold the record, but the voices of their builders have been lost. No written instructions survive, no tools of calibration remain. Only the architecture endures, perfectly aligned, precisely shaped, and perhaps resonant in ways our senses do not fully detect. Modern measurements hint at what may be possible, but much is left to reconstruction, experimentation, and imagination. The interface between stone and environment is latent, observable in principle, but awaiting the insight to reveal its full potential. As one walks among these monuments, the thought emerges that the builders' knowledge was not only in their hands, but in their perception of physical laws. Geometry, vibration, and alignment are all manifestations of a sophisticated understanding of how the world behaves, encoded in durable materials, extending across meters, tens of meters, or even hundreds. The architectural logic is functional, even if its specific operations are hidden. The stones are not inert. They respond to light, gravity, sound, and human interaction. They are instruments of observation, calculation, and perhaps even amplification.
And so the whisper lingers in the mind. The stones may not be dead. They may be tuned.
For decades, the prevailing interpretation of megalithic sites has been shaped by consensus. Monumental stones, enclosures, and circular arrangements are ritual or symbolic spaces, reflections of social hierarchy, cosmology, or collective devotion. Archaeologists emphasize ceremonial explanations, and for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The burden of proof, the weight of peer review, and the careful methods of scholarship have created a culture of caution, one that prioritizes certainty over speculation. A pillar socket in Karahantepe, a radial alignment in Jordan, a concave depression in Tiwanaku. Each is catalogued, measured, contextualized, and interpreted through the lens of symbolism first, function second. Yet within this cautious field, there exists a smaller cohort of researchers willing to entertain a different possibility, that these stones are not solely ceremonial, that their geometry, placement, and physical properties encode principles of function, calculation, or observation. Avi Gopher and Gil Hackley in Anatolia, Jean-Pierre Protzen in South America, and scholars exploring archaeoastronomy and archaeoacoustics all raise questions that unsettle the orthodoxy. They point to radial symmetry, precise leveling, concentric circles, bearing-like sockets, and interlocking joints, features whose consistency, scale, and precision suggest intentional engineering. In essence, these voices ask, could the architecture itself be technology, a medium of computation and observation, as much as a stage for ritual? Resistance is understandable, suggesting that Gobekli Tepe or Tiwanaku functioned as machines, even partially, challenges long-held assumptions. The debate is not simply academic pedantry, it is a tension between methodological rigor and imaginative interpretation, between the weight of centuries of scholarship and the possibility that we have misread the ancient record. Skeptics argue that without written instructions, without surviving mechanical parts, function cannot be proven. Proponents reply that function need not require literal gears or levers. Geometry, alignment, resonance, and placement can themselves encode knowledge, observation, and calculation. This tension, however, is beginning to shift, not through conjecture but through data. Emerging technologies are enabling a new archaeology of function, a science capable of interrogating stone with unprecedented precision. Three-dimensional laser scanning captures surfaces to micrometer tolerances, revealing subtle curvature, minute depressions, and interlocking geometries invisible to the naked eye. High-resolution photogrammetry and drone surveys map entire landscapes, uncovering alignments, radial symmetries, and sightlines that suggest intentional observation or measurement. In these datasets, patterns emerge: concentric circles, precise angular divisions, and repeated modular units that hint at logic embedded in form. Ground-penetrating radar and subsurface imaging reveal hidden features beneath plazas, platforms, and terraces. Hollow chambers, buried sockets, and structural voids can now be visualized, measured, and modeled, raising the possibility that some constructions included elements of motion, vibration, or acoustics. Computational geometry and machine learning add further power. Algorithms analyze spatial relationships across hundreds of structures simultaneously, detecting geometric and proportional consistencies that human surveyors might overlook. By comparing measurements from Anatolia, Jordan, and South America, researchers can begin to quantify patterns, testing hypotheses about function, observation, and environmental calibration. Archaeoastronomy, integrated with these methods, illuminates another dimension. Software models the solar and lunar cycles against the precise alignment of stones, platforms, and sightlines, revealing that many constructions correspond not randomly but systematically to celestial events. Solstices, equinoxes, lunar standstills, and rising stars appear in repeated architectural reference points across continents and millennia. When combined with 3D data, these alignments suggest that builders encoded astronomical observation directly into massive, immobile stone architecture, transforming the landscape itself into a computational tool, a monumental interface between human cognition and the cycles of Earth, Moon, and Sun. Even acoustics enters the equation. Studies of hollow sockets, concave surfaces, and pillar spacing demonstrate that vibration and resonance could be manipulated intentionally. Sound frequencies are enhanced, reflected, and focused within enclosures. Hollow chambers transmit waves across distances. When these acoustic properties are considered alongside geometry, orientation, and planetary alignment, a compelling possibility arises. Prehistoric architecture was not merely symbolic or ceremonial, but interactive, translating environmental forces into observable patterns, perception, and knowledge. The convergence of these technologies is redefining what we mean by evidence. Where once archaeologists relied primarily on surface excavation and typology, now we can model the invisible, quantify the abstract, and reconstruct relationships at a scale and resolution that mirrors the sophistication of the builders themselves. The mountain, the platform, the circle, they are no longer passive remnants, they are datasets, their positions, orientations, and relationships encoded in a language of stone, geometry, and physics, waiting to be read by modern science. It is here that the narrative transforms. The machine is no longer metaphorical. It is present in the data, in the interconnected alignments, the concentric geometries, the carefully leveled terraces, and the interlocking stonework. Each site, whether in Anatolia, Jordan, or the high plains of Bolivia, becomes part of a global pattern, a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring capacity to externalize knowledge into durable form. Precision, proportion, alignment, and resonance are revealed not through imagination alone, but through the rigorous application of scanning, modeling, and computation. This emerging perspective invites a radical reconsideration of the past. Could Gobekli Tepe have functioned as a macro-scale observational instrument? Did Tiwanaku's Pumapunku encode measurements of the solar cycle or environmental gradients? Were Jordan's big circles not merely ceremonial, but also functional interfaces for mapping territory, tracking stars, or calibrating time? In every case, the integration of 3D modeling, computational geometry, archaeoastronomy, and acoustics allows us to see these sites in ways that traditional excavation and typology cannot, as physical systems, interactive and precise, bridging observation, cognition, and architecture. Yet the approach remains cautious, even as it excites. Technology reveals potential, but interpretation still requires care. Patterns exist, alignments are measurable, and resonance can be quantified, but proving intent is more challenging. Here, the blend of empirical rigor and imaginative reasoning is crucial. We must follow the evidence while allowing for the possibility that prehistoric builders were capable of embedding function into form, of encoding knowledge in stone at scales that continue to defy conventional assumptions. In the end, the lesson is both scientific and philosophical. The machine is not just in the mountain, nor in the stone itself. It is in the data, in the measurable precision, the interlocking geometry, the alignments with the cosmos, and the detectable resonance of materials shaped by human hands. Through careful observation, computational analysis, and interdisciplinary inquiry, the architecture of the ancient world becomes readable in ways that hint at lost knowledge, complex reasoning, and technological sophistication previously unimagined. The mountain no longer sleeps. Its logic, precision, and perhaps even its motion are now observable through science. And as we continue to map, scan, and model, one truth emerges with quiet force. What we have long considered sacred, symbolic, or inert may instead represent the earliest expressions of engineering thought, encoded not in metal or text, but in the enduring monumental language of stone. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.